one bridges kind of both, right? Because we're talking about both from an HR, we're talking about external things now. We're looking at imagery and how imagery is used. And this covers a huge swath of things. When we've audited company websites, employment branding pages, we've audited
video content,
videos, reports, white papers,
learning management systems.
Yeah, the training we're having our employees take, the training that we're delivering within the context of our own work. So all
campaign language.
Yes, anything under the sun that has had imagery attached to it. So our notes around this one are really broad because it depends on the context of what you're trying to communicate and to whom that these might apply. What we see a lot, and you see our examples here, if you've talked to Nova on the phone, someone has said to you, look, we're not about this hands in a circle life. And that's not because we dismiss ideas of like solidarity and unity. I use unity a little bit loosely because it gets weaponized so often. But really, what are we trying to communicate with these images? They're so cheesy. They're so surface level. It is really like the bare basics when it comes to DEIB. So if anything, inauthentic. If there's anything you can do, if you're running a program yourself, or you have you're working on some of these things, just keep moving past these stock photos, find something else. We also see like a lot of the cheese ball images of like, we are so excited to be diverse. People are not that excited to be at work. Like, I get it. You're not going to show folks crying in the break room, but like, let's ground folks in reality a little bit. People having lives, being in a meeting where they're not all smiling like maniacs. That is fine. We do not have to be this cheesy. It just, again, to Jasmine's word, it screams inauthenticity. And when you're doing it specifically about diversity and visible diversity, the last thing we want to come across is inauthentic in this way, because the very kinds of employees that you're hoping to attract are going to smell it, and they see it in those images that we've chosen for those things. We also see a lot of, and this is for any audience, when an organization is trying to represent that they are diverse, which is good. There are some that don't even try, but they default to an ethnically ambiguous sort of shades of brown, and really making sure there's sort of one of every skin color. Now, I say that for a couple of reasons. There are more visible diversity ways to represent that than skin color. Obviously, race and ethnicity is a huge fault line, and specifically within our organizational culture, it should absolutely be present. There are a whole host of ways to add to that racial diversity, and or look at other signs of visible diversity. We see, even when organizations are doing a really great job at the rainbow on their page, they are missing opportunities for ability, for age, for body size, for anyone that looks outside of a gender binary or presents themselves a different way outside of a gender binary. So we see folks sort of trap themselves where you're not, then people aren't seeing themselves represented. They're just seeing great, you have a lot of brown skinned people on your page, but you haven't shown hair diversity. You haven't shown someone that like speaks to me that you intentionally thought about a kind of person, about a lived experience that you wanted to represent. That reads through when we go with, again, sort of the stock image. I'll also say you can have a meeting with all Black people in it. It's okay. You don't have to have the one of every person or a light-skinned Black person and a white person shaking hands, because that's what diversity looks like. Sometimes diversity can look like being homogenous within a marginalized identity. So look for those images that do more than just represent a seat at the table, but elevate that there are rooms in this place where there are all people of color, or there's multiple marginalizations that are visible. You really start to get intentional about that. There's also this tension we talk a lot about with our clients between the aspirational diversity and the reality of the organization. And you see, so I typed into a little Google search before this. I typed in organizational diversity and then clicked on images. And this is a real company. And both of these images are real images from their real website. And then one click over was their About Us page and their leadership team. And sorry to these folks, it's all public. We're not trying to dox anyone or go after them on LinkedIn, but this is their leadership team. And we see this every day, where we have the first stock images that pop up, we have all kinds of brown and black hands in the mix and very few of those faces on the actual team. Does that mean only show on your website? If you happen to be a primarily white, primarily male organization, you should reflect that so that you have integrity? Not necessarily. First of all, work on it, right? We're 2023. Like, we got to work on it. We got to do better. And we can't trick people into coming here. Now, luckily, I don't think either of these images are tricking anybody, are gonna get past anybody. But we do see, and there's a lot of tension from employees when organizations go so far and they put a version of the company either in marketing or on their website or in their on their LinkedIn that just isn't true, right? And like they're then attracting people, and they're really putting up a false pretense about what where the organization is. So however, we need to find that balance. It is a balance that has to be found. And you have to talk about both sides of it. You can't just be aspirational, but then not be doing the work across the senior leadership and regional leadership team. It has to be both things. And we see this a lot.
I agree. I would say also too, to add to that, be honest about where you are in your organization and what you're working on. If your pictures reflect what we're seeing on the screen right now, okay. But also that's an opportunity for your organization to say, we know what this looks like. We're working on it. We have this program and we're working on it. And, again, back to that word, authenticity, that's way more important than a bunch of random brown hands on your About Us section of your website.
I think, too, to be honest, that marginalized people often have a shared experience of knowing that they're entering spaces and that they're not going to be accommodated for. And so there's sometimes this paternal urge to say, well, we want people to feel comfortable here. And so you take these hands in a circle images. And what you're doing is it gives a strange vibe. Like, there's no organic multicultural group of friends who are putting their hands in a circle in a park. Like, there's some symbolism that doesn't necessarily translate very well to real life. And so just being honest when you're having conversations with folks and they're asking questions about the dynamic or inclusion or diversity efforts within your workplace, of being clear about where you are and if there is an expectation for employees to contribute to that moving forward.
Absolutely. It's giving Get Out, right? It's
100%.
Yeah.
It's bad energy.
It's not good.
The vibes are off. And also
gloomy.
No one, regardless of the color of the hands, no one in the history of work has ever done this in a workplace. We've never put our hands in the middle. Also, we're on Zoom now. So
maybe we should.
What we've been missing?
Nova Gather.
Absolutely.
No, that is so cheesy. We would never.
Yes.
Trustful. Okay, the last piece around imagery, and this goes more towards like external materials that we've seen in like marketing materials and some textbooks, things like that we've audited, where we see images that are straight up microaggressive. And as we know, if you've been in a Nova workshop, you know that microaggressions are unintentional often. They're not at all meant to cause harm for the most part, and they do. And they're perpetuating some of these dominant narratives that are really harmful. So examples of that are when we're talking about incarcerated people, it's all Black men, right? Sitting behind bars or in these images. Or when we're talking about families, it's by far and away or exclusively heteronormative family structures or nuclear family, two-parent, male-female family structures that we're seeing reflected. That is not a lot of people's lived experiences across a spectrum of experiences. And so that can feel microaggressive if you're saying this is what a family is, right? At this school or to us or within this organization. We also see a lot of white savior images, we'll call them, where maybe it's a national aid organization or nonprofit, and we have somebody in some generic African country that then has a white doctor that's taking care of them, right? Or like and we've literally seen this, we see folks sitting in the dirt. And that's the message that we're left with, that in these countries, these kinds of people with this skin color sit in the dirt, and through the grace of white people have access to the resources they need. Those could be very real situations. That could be somebody going through that country and snapping a candid photo of an actual thing that they saw, but without context. And in the context of this, what we're putting forward, it takes on a different meaning. So again, unintentional, we have to have that lens on when we look at these images. We have to zoom out. We can't just worry about what this means to us here at this organization. How might this land on people looking at this? A number of different people. How might white people interpret this? What narrative does this uphold of theirs? How might Black people interpret this? What narratives do they see here? Like, we have to be able to take a multi-partial and identity-focused lens when we look at that. We'll get more into that later. Because I'll also say that's where we do see probably some of the most pushback is from when we're auditing images and we're saying, like, no, there's nothing inherently wrong with this picture. You put it next to a picture of a gorilla. You cannot do that. And they melt down. So it takes a lot. And again, nobody's being imprisoned for doing this. But we do have to have that zoom out conversation. It can be hard. That is often another role. That is another check and balance. It's very hard to do that when you're the person who created it in the first place. So building that into a process around images is really important, because having fresh eyes can show you so many different things.